online. So I'm just going to see if she's already there, and just checking I suspect she will show up on screen in a minute. Or does it mean she needs to be? Okay, great. So I see actually both our online speakers are already there. So let's start with Halyna Yanchenko, Deputy Chairperson of the Parliamentary Faction of the Political Party, Servant of the People, Chair of the Investor Protection Commission, Head of the Public Control Council at NABU, a background in anti-corruption, civil society work. We're really happy to have you with us, dialing in from Kyiv. I hope everything works, and then I would pass the floor on to you, and we're keen to hear your input here. Thank you. We're not hearing her. Just to say, we're not hearing you yet. But maybe you can just keep speaking, and at some point, if we hear you, we'll give you a signal. No.
I don't know. I can.
Yes. No. Yep.
Perfect. Here we go. Fantastic. So, hello everyone. Many thanks to organizers for putting this event together and hosting me and having it's a pleasure and honor to actually share some thoughts, ideas, and updates from Ukraine, from Kyiv, Ukraine. So I will start if everyone can hear me already and everything is fine. It is great. So I will start my speech from the phrase that became already a well-known one. Be brave like Ukraine. Today, this is one of the most known slogans about Ukraine, and it pictures not only Ukrainian society, not only Ukrainian army, but I would say business that works in Ukraine as well. Because well, especially if you think about it from abroad, it takes courage to actually continue business, continue operating in the country that is in war. And that's why I don't get tired to admire all the entrepreneurs who are currently operating in Ukraine. And I'm talking about both domestic companies and also foreign companies, including the German ones. And we see that German companies also continue operating in Ukraine, and the level of their determination, it is very appreciated. Today we will discuss the prospects of investing in Ukraine. And although it has been 2 years since the start of Russian full-scale invasion, there were a lot of changes in Ukraine. And I would say that Ukraine has emerged much stronger over this time. This is actually, it might sound ironically, and that's why I will not mention my second point, because I'll just really stop on the fact that Ukraine did become much stronger, both Ukrainian army, Ukrainian society, and of course the business that is working in Ukraine. What do I mean by saying that? Well, first of all, Ukraine made a huge progress in its sustainability of both political and economical operation. So over the past 2 years, Ukraine has received the candidacy status of EU membership, and without no over-exaggeration, I can say that now Ukraine also has the strongest army in the whole Europe. Moreover, we obtained a unique experience in building and operating the energy sector that can sustain in the most harsh and difficult conditions. And especially the past winter has shown that that Ukrainian electricity companies, both private but also municipal and state, operated fantastically. They did actually show the examples of a kind of a magic. I want to provide you with some feedback from the real picture of business activities in Ukraine, which might be difficult to actually understand or discern from the media. Because mainstream media primarily focus on Russian shelling and attacks, which still persist. And today in the morning, we did also had an attack on Kyiv, unfortunately. But fortunately, the air defense forces have put down all the missiles that were directed on Kyiv. And for that, I also would like to thank German society, Germany as a country, and German political leaders, because majority of the air defense forces, especially the serious air defense equipment, we did receive from Germany. And I will also encourage encourage the participants of this event to actually continue advocating for air defense, for more and stronger air defense for Ukraine, because it's a matter of safety of people, of just civilians, but also a matter of safe operation of actually companies. So after a certain decline in business activities in 2022, we saw a revival of business activities in 2023, and now it keeps going on. Overall, the recent trend indicates a gradual thaw, and business, including international ones, are launching significant investment projects in Ukraine. I would like to be specific here and give you some examples. First, Biopharma, which is a leading German multinational chemical pharmaceutical corporation, announced in 2023 that they are planning to invest 60 million euros in its state-of-art seed plant in the Zhytomyr region, where I am originally from. So this news is very very nice and sweet to me, both because I am involved in investment activities, but also because this is the region of my origin. Secondly, recently the German Rheinmetall expressed its intention to build at least 4 weapons production plants in Ukraine, which is fantastic as well, because it means that basically the front line of Ukraine, and we are talking that now it's also a shield of the whole Europe, will be better protected. On one hand, on another hand, Rheinmetall will get a number of benefits as well, because of the cheaper labor, because of the cheaper logistics, but also because these logistics will be quicker, and everything that is needed for the front line and for the defense of Ukraine will be obtained by Ukrainian defenders. And once again, European defenders overall much quicker. Thirdly, the world's second largest metallurgical company, ArcelorMittal, will invest $130 million in its production facilities in Ukraine, and they also announced about it last year. Fourth, the Turkish Onur Group is successfully investing in renewable energy and the installation of the wind turbines in Ukraine. So even green energy is in a dynamic, basically, position. And in 2023, Turkish Onur Group investments have reached 150 million of US dollars. So as you see, the big players, they don't stop. They continue investing. I'm not even mentioning Ukrainian companies here or smaller companies that, especially retailers, that are opening and inviting their network basically on a daily and weekly basis. Moreover, I should say that Ukrainian government is both Ukrainian government, but Ukrainian parliament as well are working hard to be in active dialogue with Ukrainian and international investors to see what are the main risks or concerns, and we try to react on these concerns with all the measures we have. In 2022. We have started negotiations with, when we realized that a number of ongoing investment projects were about to be freezed because of the war risks. We have started negotiations with two biggest American insurance agencies, which are DFC and DFC under the Department of Finance of the US government, and also MIGA, which operate under the World Bank mandate. We have started negotiations with them to actually cover new investors in Ukraine with war insurance. At that point, it seemed to be almost impossible to have this to have this insurance, because we are talking about basically insuring the force majeures, which no one really does. But we managed to actually have successful negotiations, and now new Ukrainian investors, both domestic and foreign investors, including German investors, can obtain this insurance, and it has a very democratic price. Only 1% of the war insurance costs only 1% of the total investment budget. Later on, also a number of European countries have joined the initiative, and now we are talking about 19 countries, in addition to US, that do cover war insurance for their investors who invest in Ukraine. It gives actually these facts give us optimism when we are talking about investment opportunities in Ukraine. And therefore, I really encourage the participants to also consider these opportunities. And in Ukraine, we have fantastic economic part of the government, but also economic part of the parliament, which are very open, which are very helpful. And if we were a private sector, I would even use the word client-oriented. In this case, investors-oriented. Me as well, I'm very open and always ready to provide consultations, contacts, information, and maybe some advices about the sectors which might be the most attractive, about the locations which might be the most attractive, about local partners if that is needed, and things like that. So I really hope that there will be some people who will consider investment in Ukraine after this event as well. Thank you.
I think it was saving energy. Thank you so much, Ms. Yanchenko. That was really excellent. Both really good examples of investment decisions that are really being made in a number of critical sectors, including energy, but also touching on the really important role of insurance and a very
okay. Now we have a reverse problem because I don't hear you.
Oh. Thanks for letting us know. Is it better now? No, it's okay now? Okay, I'll just say it one more time, and then So again, thank you very much. I think you just laid out some really good examples of investment decisions already happening, the importance of insurance in these circumstances, but of course also pointing out to a vibrant, growing economy with growing power needs that, of course, again, can be met most easily with renewables as you bring them online. So that was really great. I just want to double check. I think you might need to leave us now. So if anyone has any particular follow-up questions to what you said, we'll just take a minute for those. And otherwise, we would do sort of a Q&A session at the end of the panel, but then you wouldn't need to stay online for that. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Svetlana has a question.
Yeah, I do have a question. Yeah, so we're still looking for not energy saving like so far, just really good. Yeah, I just had one follow-up question, Halyna. Thank you so much. Дуже дякуємо вам за таку розгорнуту презентацію і за ваш оптимізм. I just said that we are really grateful for your optimism and we really can see how strong and economically oriented our government and our parliament is. And I just wanted to follow up. We recently had a big win with submitting the Ukraine plan and also being halfway towards finalizing the National Energy and Climate Plan. The main comment I wanted to make, and I would love if you could respond it, so regarding the National Energy and Climate Plan, there is a very outdated energy transition goal over there, which is 27% of renewable energy by 2030. We believe it should be much more ambitious and higher and more aligned with European Green Deal goals, which could even make 50% by 2030 and in totally 100% by 2040. Do you believe this is economically feasible and this would benefit Ukraine at the end? And also, are you currently happy with the percentage, 20% for the green rebuilding goals that has been put in the Ukraine plan and Ukraine facility, basically? Thank you so much.
Talking about and energy sector, I should say that probably energy sector is also among the top, both top priorities, but also top 5 top sectors that are beneficial and interesting and even attractive for investors nowadays in Ukraine. During the past 2 years, so we are talking about the years when Ukraine was in the full-scale, suffering from full-scale invasion. Despite that fact, over 660 megawatts of new capacity from renewable energy sources were introduced in Ukraine. So it means couple things. First of all, the fact that renewable energy is remaining a priority for private sector investments, but also for the government as well. Second, we understand that right now, nowadays, Ukrainian energy sector needs a tremendous transformation because it was based and focused on nuclear energy plants. And it's good that we have them because it's a source of cheaper energy, at least currently or in a short-term period. But given the fact that especially last winter, Russians were heavily attacking the energy infrastructure, our Ministry of Energy, also Cabinet of Ministers, and everyone who are the decision makers in this sector, they have suggested that we need to change our energy strategy, and we need to have more small generations, which are much closer to the to those who actually use it. So it means that a whole bunch of new generation and new wires should be built. And we are talking about all types of energy, but mainly the renewable one. the renewables one. Thirdly, now for a year already, there are big discussions in Ukrainian parliament that we need to actually introduce new legislation and actually motivate biogas and biodiesel and biogasoline production in Ukraine. We have fantastic basis for it in Ukraine because Ukraine does grow a huge amount of raw material, basically agriculture that can be used and that can be processed into a biodiesel and biogasoline. And especially given some logistic issues that obtain from time to time with our Polish friends, and more farmers are looking into the Ukrainian farmers, but once again, the foreign investors who are involved in agriculture, they're looking toward processing the agricultural cultures, sorry, for that into biodiesel and biogas. So to sum up now, if I am not mistaken, because I am not an energy expert per se, but if I'm not mistaken, now the level or share of renewable energy is about 10% in according to the documents and strategies, and by 2030, once again, as far as I am informed, it is planned to have at least 25% of energy balance directed or focused on renewable energy. I believe this is our common European strategy. This is the renewable energy is our future, and it's our ecology, it's our health, and that is why we don't have any other choice or any other path, because we are on our way to European family, to our European home, and European values is something that is very important for us. This is a part of our culture. This is a part of what we are fighting now.
To our next speaker now. My mic is a little, there you go. That's completely off, yeah. Our next speaker, Rouven Stubbe, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. You're going to talk about some recommendations from your... It's not. Is it?
Hello.
Please, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. So my little speech or presentation is going to be a bit more future focused. Of course, the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine still rages on, and it has tremendous effects for the power sector as well. I don't know if you're sharing the slides that I prepared. I can't see them, but that's also because I can't see the screen. Basically, I want to talk a little bit about a comparison of different scenarios from recent studies that looked at the decarbonization of Ukraine's power sector, and then also briefly talk about the impact of CBAM and the role of Ukraine's upcoming emissions trading system, ETS. So just very briefly, my name is Rouven Stubbe. I'm a consultant at Berlin Economics, an economic consultancy that works a long time And both reports actually show that a highly decarbonized power system for Ukraine by 2030, and even more so by 2040, is possible with about 85 to 90% of clean energy generation, so renewables and nuclear, and a coal phase out by 2035. In one of the scenarios by the REC-Dixie IEF report, even by 2030, a full coal phase out. Also the full decarbonization of the power sector by 2050 is not only possible, but in these scenarios, even the economical option. So it is also feasible in some of these scenarios without new nuclear reactors and with power prices similar to fossil scenarios that were kind of the comparison or reference scenarios in these studies. If we look at the installed generation capacities by 2030 in these scenarios, we see that in both the net zero world and the REC-Dixie IEF scenarios, there would be around 16 to 17 gigawatts of solar power and around 7 gigawatts of wind power, with 4 to 5.7 gigawatt of gas power plants, which would, however, run a limited amount of hours in the year and more provide balancing and backup capacities. In some preliminary results that the Low Carbon Ukraine project has conducted, we found that the cost optimal power plant park for 2030 would be more wind-based, so a higher share of wind generation, a bit lower than in the solar PV build out than the other two studies. But the general picture is kind of quite similar, with 85 to 90% of clean electricity generation by 2030, not only being feasible, but actually being quite economical. And also in the Net Zero World and the REC-Dixie IF studies, we see that actually post-2030, there would be a largely wind-based renewable generation system, with just kind of underlining that the excellent wind conditions in Ukraine that make this the more economical option, in combination, of course, with some solar PV as well, even though the investment cost per installed megawatt is higher for wind. So there is a large need for mobilization of investments, of course, to achieve these targets for or possible build out of wind and solar, and I think we will talk much more about this in the second panel. But I want to talk about one specific policy here, which is the upcoming emissions trading system for Ukraine. So an emission trading system, of course, puts a cap on carbon emissions in the sectors that it covers, and then thereby creates a price for carbon, which then ideally would be more substantial than the current carbon tax that Ukraine has, which is below €1 per ton of CO2. And by making fossil generation more expensive, this would, of course, make it more economical for renewables to produce, also because the prices in the wholesale market when gas or coal-based generation is still producing would be higher, so higher revenues and therefore better investment conditions for renewables. Of course, Ukraine is in a particular situation right now with the war still ongoing and kind of uncertainties surrounding the speed of the recovery, post-war recovery. So it is a particular situation to introduce an emissions trading system for a country, and we looked at this recently in our work with a larger study. Basically, every ETS has certain uncertainties on the carbon price, because the demand for allowances is uncertain, depends on economic growth, technological progress, etc. But for Ukraine, with the uncertainty surrounding the structure of Ukraine's economy and also the timing and dynamics of the post-war recovery, there would be very high uncertainties surrounding demand for allowances and thus uncertainties for the carbon price. And we do think that it's very crucial in designing Ukraine's ETS to take account this problem and to really design it with a very strong price stability mechanism. We basically see two options there: either a transitional period with fixed prices, fixed carbon prices, ideally increasing over time, or a second option with a price collar, where we would introduce an increasing carbon price floor that ensures at least certain investments are certainly profitable for investors if investment cost is below this or mitigation cost of CO2 is below this minimum price. And also the price path matters for EU convergence and for CBAM. Basically, to avoid a carbon price shock upon EU accession, Ukraine should aim at a carbon price in the ETS that converges with EU ETS prices in the next couple of years. It depends, of course, not immediately, but over a certain period of time. And it's crucial to kind of take this into account when designing Ukraine's ETS. So maybe just in conclusion, we do see that a highly decarbonized power system by 2030 and even more so by 2040 is possible and also economical, and full decarbonization by 2050 is economical. But there are certain policy reforms that are necessary to really incentivize these investments into wind and solar. Electricity market reforms, strengthening the independence of the regulator, mitigating also excessive market power, and then also introducing a robust emissions trading system for Ukraine.
Thank you. That was great. We're a little bit behind time, so I'm just going to suggest we move straight to Dave Jones, who has been patiently waiting online. I've already seen him there. Dave, so just briefly introduce Dave. He's been working in electricity markets for about 20 years, both private sector and now at one of the leading analytical think tanks on power markets called Ember. So very glad to have you with us, Dave. Take us through it, and then.
In person, and I would just like to share my screen just so I can share my slides. 1 second. So I've been asked to just give a bit of a whistle-stop tour of the transition within Europe, what's happening within the EU and what's happening within the European Union on the transition at the moment. That might give a little bit of context to what people are considering investment in Ukraine. Really, this is a bit of an update about our latest generation that we've been producing at Ember. We track the European electricity transition, and there's 4 main things that we saw as trends through the last 12 months. One is a record fossil collapse. The next is that we're about to hit a new era of rising electricity demand, electrification. Third is just the underlying core of wind and solar that are driving that transition. And fourthly, that stage we're at now in the transition is needing more and more attention on system flexibility. And last year in the EU, if you remember back in 2022, there was a bit of a rebound in emissions, a whole talk about Europe going back to coal. In large, that was around a real shortage of hydro generation and nuclear generation, which had really big 500-year drought across Europe. It had real big problems at EDF in France with their nuclear outages. And what we saw as we went into 2023 was a lot of that generation returned back again and undoing what had been a very tough year for 2022, regardless of the energy crisis in itself. And that resulted in record falls. It resulted in a record fall in coal generation across the EU of 26%. It resulted in a record power generation fall, and indeed the 4th year in a row of falling power generation. And that caused almost a fifth, 19%, almost a fifth of Europe's electricity emissions fall in the power sector. And what has happened over the last 2 years, and even with that big fall in coal generation last year, what's happened is that coal capacity hasn't been falling. So you'd be quite aware of this, that as the gas crisis developed through 2022, there was a pause in closures of coal power plants. And this graph on the left shows that is about to change very quickly. So 4% of coal capacity has been shut in the last 2 years in the EU, but just between this year and next year, 20% will be shut, putting us back on track towards phasing out coal across Europe. This year, a lot of that capacity being shut will be within Germany, with about 10 gigawatts coming off, much of it as soon as next month. And then in 2025, a lot of coal capacity coming off in Italy, Poland and Greece and Spain. And Europe's electricity transition isn't just about getting off coal; it's getting off fossil generation in total, and gas is very much next. These three countries are responsible for half of the EU's gas generation, and you can see that black line in there, which is coal generation, has almost been phased out now in these three countries as wind and solar have been expanding. And what we know that's going to happen in the coming years from now is that wind and solar will continue to expand very rapidly across every country in the EU, but especially in these three countries. And that means that with coal generation already phased out, gas generation is going to start to begin to fall in these key gas countries. And when we look at electricity demand, there's been a real big fall within the EU. EU electricity demand is down by about 6% in 23 versus 2021, and a large amount of that is from the fall in the three industrial, really energy-intensive industrial sectors, which is steel, chemicals, and paper. And underlying that, you can't really see that in the numbers because of the fall, and also because of the mild weather that we've had over the last year and 2 winters, is that actually structurally electricity demand is rising, and that's because of electrification of the economy. So when we think about electricity demand, this isn't just about about wind and solar. It's not just about decarbonising the power sector. It's also about decarbonising other sectors. And then since the war started, there was 3 million heat pumps sold across Europe, 3 million electric vehicles sold across Europe. And already that's seeing a rise in electricity demand, which is due to continue as that electrification picks up. And when the war first started, I think that most countries the natural response was actually to double down on what they knew was working already, which was on wind and solar. And we're starting to see the fruits of that already. So last year, wind and solar hit a record generation, a record 27% of the EU's generation. A third of that was from solar, 2/3 of it from wind. So wind playing a really predominant role still within the race for renewables, and that's now pushed total European renewable generation above 40% for the first time. And just to give you an idea of the milestones within this and the magnitude within this, wind's now reached that milestone of having generated more than gas generation for the first time ever. So that's the level of wind that's now coming onto the system. Coal generation has fallen back to a record low level last year, at just 12% of Europe's electricity mix. And gas and coal together, we're now down to a third of our electricity coming from fossil fuels in total. And the journey now for the EU, now it's got to such a high level penetration of wind and solar, and planning to actually speed that deployment up even faster, is the flexibility that needs to go around it. So this is an hourly matrix of fossil generation at an EU level last year, and you can see a period to lunchtime over summer. Already there's very low levels of fossil generation. During periods of windy periods over winter, you can see for days, weeks time, there's very low levels of fossil generation. And the numbers in blue, where there's higher levels of fossil generation, you're going to need some more flexibility as you scale up wind and solar, to be able to move the electricity from where it's been, the hours it's being delivered, into the hours when it's being needed. And that's really the next challenge coming along. Interconnection is playing a major role in that. Battery storage will play a very major role in that. The price falls in battery storage have been absolutely unprecedented. albeit only giving kind of hours at a time rather than days or weeks at a time. And then it's really to try to think around what that mid-duration storage is for days and weeks of electricity, and in the short term, that's going to be small amounts of gas generation. And in the longer term, you can see the plans for Germany, also the plans for the UK about having hydrogen-ready gas plants that will be providing that. So they're taking the excess wind and solar during those hours, storing it in hydrogen and bringing it back into the grid when it's needed. Actually, from a seasonal perspective, it's not that much. And we're talking about that flexibility key. It's really about hours that can be provided with batteries. It's days and weeks that can be provided with hydrogen, with hydro, with interconnection, and less so about the seasonality, where in the EU as a whole, there's a really nice pattern of complementarity between solar and wind, where there's more wind in winter compared to less wind, less sun during winter. So that was just a kind of a bit of a whistle top taste of what's happening in the EU in itself, and the conclusion really is it's just really about that. Those big strides have been unlocked in 2023 against the slightly kind of Miaga picture that was stifled in 2022 from the nuclear and the hydro outlooks. That shift in coal generation to renewables is also about gas and how gas will be next. And really the next focus in the EU now is around electricity flexibility, but also about electrification, so that to help the EU's decarbonisation, not just of the power sector, but of transport and buildings, through which electric vehicles and heat pumps will play a vital role in that. Electric vehicles are now reaching that tipping point where within China, they're hitting 50% of new car sales already. Within heat pumps, there's been some really structural changes in the technology and the refrigerants within that enable them to heat water up higher, to be able to heat it up more efficiently, to be able to operate at much colder temperatures that really act as a really useful like a drop into boilers in a way that they weren't able to do in the same way a few years ago. So real kind of an opportunity to step up on electrification, which is what countries are really gearing for next in the European Union. Thank you very much.
Maybe. Oh, I'm here. I give you. Yes? I will be next, yes?
You're next, go ahead.
Oh, so the best and interesting part of this event, I think, I give maybe two big figures around coal plant and this potential around the covering by alternative energy for next transformation in Ukraine energy system. So first of all, good afternoon, dear ladies, gentlemen, colleagues, experts, everyone present this important event. Let me express my senior graduate for the opportunity to address you to share the results of our comprehensive study with focuses on a highly relevant and transnational moment in our energy history. The potential of replacing coal-fired power plants with alternative renewable energy sources. It is known that a significant number of our coal-fired power plants have either been thoroughly damaged or under the control of aggressor of Russian Federation. The loss of infrastructure is not only a challenge, but also is a unique opportunity to rethink the transformation of our energy system. Based on a study connected in February, we found the plants on our list, and you can find it in our documents, need immediate repairs already completely shut down. The total capacity of the coal-fired plants is impressive. It's approximately 17 of gigawatts of electricity. So, underlining this, how critical immediate action to support our power system, which currently operate in an emergency mode with no significant reserve capacity in our energy system. Our calculation, if you see in presentation, but unfortunately I don't see really. Yes, our calculation shows that the challenges, circumstances, the installation of distributed generation from alternative energy sources is not only possible but also necessary step. This approach will provide us with greater energy security and self-sufficiency, allowing us reduce emissions from a coal power plant by the 19%. Based on this analysis and experience of countries such as Germany, we see that full replacement of a coal-fired generation is possible and financially achievable in a few years, but requires investments at a huge scale. We understand that line of investment in this case is very long. And the head question, when we start, because now we really have a good opportunity to start how to cover the alternative situation with blocks on heat station and how we build real scale to move forward for to use this alternative energy resources. So the next one, estimates of investment is distributed generation in areas of photovoltaic power plants, wind power, energy storage and cogeneration plants. We see that the potential for events in Ukraine is approximately to cover all of this coal plant. It's near 12, maybe 17 billion of US dollars. It's not immediately. We can speak about 5, 6, maybe 7 years for investment and start this process now. And the example of energy distribution balance that we can look up to demonstrate the integration of renewables is not only possible, but can also serve an indicator of future plans for development of our energy system. So in this case, we see this all of this risk and see on YouTube this problem with local big generation in one point. But if we have real decentralized energy efficiency system, and it will be very interesting to not only the use but energy security for our energy security energy system. And in context of the war military risk, we see the potential for financing to cover by financial institutions this risk and start work with new investment possibilities in alternative energy resources. So the most interesting, and that's why I start this this report in February. But after in February, I know that in Khurakhova heat station, 2 blocks have down, and every day the situation in Ukraine is changed. And nevertheless, we need to build new, real, good and security system for protect people in electricity. Because if someone, and we are remember 2 years ago, everybody go to the shops and buy a generator on a gasoline, start inventing the inventors, some accumulators, and so on. But now we thought about this more and huge and interesting thing, how to be more secured in our system, not only in the local, but for a business, for our homes, and so on. Now I see that's a real good situation for photovoltaic station in business, because the tariffs now it's approximately 6 grivnas, or how it is, it's €1.50 for 1 kilowatt. But for people, this tariff is we look on this, it's very low, and we must think about where we can take this money for reconstruct the system, because really this situation is very, very critical. And when you read this report, you understand the consumption of coal, what's the value of coal we are consuming in Ukraine, what's the value of a generation from the coal, and what's the value of electricity from the coal. And first of all, I would like to say thank you for your investigation in this part, because CBAM is one of the first, I think, problem for this coal plant in understanding for selling the next steps for sell electricity in the grid for Europe and for us. So please, we have prepared this, and everybody have connect to our report. We share it in the internet and our website, and any link and in where you want. So please, of course, we give you the books what we are prepared and printing for us. We can like to give you maybe more information what we have to start this process for investment in coal potential in Ukraine. It's more than 15 and 16 years that we have for this heat station. It's very, very complicated process, and I think we started. Yes, Pieter.
Great. Thank you very much. Did you finish?
Yes, please. You can edit something.
I just want to also introduce you, because I didn't do that before.
Sorry,
it's
very
we
fast.
We should use the opportunity of the microphone working, but Maxim is the team lead on green reconstruction at Razom, and has a long distinguished career in the energy sector. So thank you very much for...
That is interesting. I'm not giving you this information, but it is interesting some of the things, because my previous work with fuel and gas systems, so it is interesting to reconnect to green energy. So,
you know what you're talking about. That's
yes.
We're a little bit over time, but I still want to take a couple of minutes for people to come back with some quick questions, reflections on what you've just heard, before we then go into the coffee break, and we'll go into the panel afterwards. So I'm looking around the room. I can't see anyone online, so I guess you will, or someone will give me a signal if there's an online question. In fact, there was also an interesting figure at the end of your slides about the total investment needs that you had.
Yes.
Maybe you want to just...
Yes, it is more simple to calculate, because everybody asks where you take the money, where you take these figures about, and numbers. Look, my experience shows that 1 megawatts approximately of a generation for cogeneration station, it's reason between the value and generation, it's approximately 1 megawatts, it's $1 million of US dollars. If your generation more, that 1 megawatts is more cheapest. And energy, who work in energy understand when you build, you know what's the real price. Another situation with the wind, and this prices for 1 megawatt going down, and for solar plants, this prices go down for 1 megawatt. And I think we have the business here. They comment the real situation with the prices, but the real prices, it's near 1 million for 1 megawatt electricity, maybe a little bit more, 100, and so on. So if you have the business, we have comment this later, or how it is.
Great. I saw one question in the back. Do we have a way to get the microphone to...
What's the role for interconnectors between Ukraine and Europe
So the question is about the role of interconnectors between Ukraine and the EU. And
Okay, it's a simple question, but it's not as simple. It's not as simple because if you know, if you know these new lines between Europe and Ukraine, it's open and capacity and power of the line, it's too low. And I know that Ukrenergo now build new lines for transmit this electricity and green electricity and the next and the future. And it's a huge work for Ukrenergo. Maybe they so they give us information more because we are not in understanding of a grid. We mostly speak about the local consumption now. So that is interesting. Maybe you comment this.
okay.
Yeah, maybe I can add a little, a few words. So, what we see in our modeling work, this is now mostly speaking about 2030 scenarios with relatively ambitious build out of renewables. That with current interconnector capacities, there's actually quite a lot of congestion of these interconnectors. So this signals that there is a need, and it would be economically attractive to build out, to build more interconnectors. And one of the reasons is that Ukraine, being, of course, so far east from the kind of Central and Western Europe, and having also a large territory, has basically sometimes is in different wind systems than parts of Central or Western Europe, which then makes it actually very attractive to share back and forth energy. So when there's excess generation in the EU, the EU can export to Ukraine, or vice versa in scenarios with relatively high wind penetration. And we do see this also reflected in our models.
Right. One final remark from Svetlanka, and then we'll go into the break.
Yes, because Rouven, you've mentioned something particularly really interesting, and I can't really go for break not expanding on what you just said. You've said that the energy goals you put into your modeling were relatively ambitious, and how to make them truly ambitious, because that's how we respond, even being half destroyed our energy system. But there is a huge political will, I believe, and a lot of things saying. Think tanks and stakeholders and investors actually are looking for a more ambitious goals. Do you see any increase in those ambitions, and what's the pathway to a really ambitious goals, and what would it take? And I think we can close with that and digest this a bit. Thank you.
Okay, let me try. So I think one of the bottlenecks at the moment, and this has been already mentioned before, I don't know by whom, is that Ukraine is currently operating the power system really in an emergency mode where there's really a lack of reserve, but also a lack of balancing capacities. Or most of the time it's working fine at the moment, but it's really at the margin. So there's a need for additional flexibility and balancing sources. This has been aggravated also by the Russian attack on the hydropower plant. And Kakhovka Dam, sorry. And so I think there's a need for additional balancing capacities to introduce additional renewables, of course. Also, interconnection both within the country and with the neighboring countries, of course, can help to integrate more renewables and to balance out differences, regional differences in renewable generation. And then I think it's really a question about political ambition, clear plans, and really good, well-designed market reforms. So electricity market reforms, addressing some of the issues on the wholesale market with the price caps and price floors, so that really there are economical incentives to introduce also additional storage capacities. And then also moving forward with like competitive auctions for renewable feed-in tariffs, feed-in premiums, and other kind of reforms also on an institutional level. Green certificates, exactly, guarantees of origin, which is now kind of on the way with the recent law on promotion of renewables and the green transformation. and a couple of other institutional reforms, strengthening the independence of the regulator, etc.
Great. Let's wrap this panel up. I just want a round of applause for the panelists both here and online. I would just suggest that we'll reconvene at 16:50, 5 minutes later, so we have a bit more of a coffee break, and I'll ask my colleague Mark to then be a little bit briefer in his closing remarks at the end. So applause for the panel, and thank you very much.